Hello and welcome back to Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
I'm Devon Ewald.
And today we're going to be talking about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, 1966, directed by Mike Nichols from a play by Edward Albee. And there's a lot to unpack with this one. I don't know, I feel like I could go on forever.
How were you introduced to it?
In college, kind of like around the same time that I was introduced to Billy Wilder. Like I just got so into that, one, the writer-director, and then just based off of seeing The Graduate, I kind of had this idolization going on of Mike Nichols, just as a character, and he just seemed like such a rock star of a film director during that time. And
he seemed like an actor's director.
Yes.
Like, yeah. A director actors want to work with because of the characters.
And for that reason, like that was the reason why I started to kind of really look into him and started to watch his films more, because I feel like when you're in film school and you want to be a director, it's like there's no one comes to you and says, "Oh, you have to do this, this, and this," and how do you find your
it's almost
style?
assumed.
So I wanted to know, like, what is it to be an actor's director? Like, how should you work with actors? I had no clue.
You know, it's funny, the whole actor's director thing, because I did think of Streetcar during this, about the toxic relationship, yet there's love at the heart of it, and Kazan being considered a actor's director in the same type of...
Right, and that same thing of like Kazan was such a god of the playwriting world and the stage world, and then he came to directing, and kind of like the same way as Mike Nichols is. I feel like most directors who are pegged as being actors directors are also dismissed as not being very cinematic, like they're just filming plays.
Right.
And Mike Nichols kind of showed to me as like someone who loves the camera and loves cinema.
You know, just as being good at writing short stories is kind of a reveal into a writer's strength because of how hard it is to do, I think in a similar vein, being able to make a play cinematic on the screen is its own whole. For Glengarry Glen Ross, I mean, you look at what Foley did to elevate that. It's similar here in how he shoots it. He's able to, and same thing with Tony Richardson. It's like you find reasons to leave the house. I mean, I don't think that was in the play. Right. I don't think that stopping at the the roadhouse. Right. It's like, so you find ways to make it feel real. And one thing I loved about this is the immediacy of the conflict, and it just felt like you were a fly on the wall, experiencing it all in real time. Like it just felt, the way it was edited just felt like you were there the whole time, and like it never cut. It almost felt like there were no cuts, even though there were.
And he got flack for, first of all, looking at this film, it's really you can look at it as kind of like a master class as to how you transform a play into a film. But then you think about it and it's like, this was his first movie. Yeah. And it's like, that's not fair.
He was nominated for Best Director for his first movie.
Right.
I mean.
And when I first saw this movie, it just blew me away just because of the text of it, and it was kind of, it was something like on first viewing, it's like I'm not
gonna... It's so rapid fire too.
Yeah, and you're not, like, it's so dense and so layered that on a first viewing you're just like, oh, absolutely. I like the performances,
it's like a puzzle to figure out.
Yeah. And when I listened to, he's got a commentary on this with Steven Soderbergh, and I swear to God that commentary, I can listen to it every day. And I learned about lenses from just watching this movie and listening to the commentary. Wow. Because he said that, that was the one thing. A little trivia note is that when he was assigned to direct this, he was talking to Anthony Perkins, who was a friend of his, and he had worked with Orson Welles and Hitchcock, and he's like, I need to pick your brain about the camera because I have no idea. The story that he tells is that Perkins asked him, like, he's like, okay, so what do you want to know? And he's like, well, I want to have a shot of them coming into the door, and I want it to be very close to them as they come through the door, but won't the door hit the lens? And Perkins had to like explain to him, like, no, you put different lenses on there, like you have a long lens so that it will give the impression that you're close to something when the camera is farther away.
Right.
And his naivete into the camera and his willingness and his need to be cinematic. He just sat down and he learned everything he needed to know about lenses and why this lens does this. What is the virtue of having the background or a character in the background be out of focus and the person in the foreground be in focus?
You know, there's such a variety of depth, visual depth throughout the film, because I think the interior of the house is supposed to feel claustrophobic. You're supposed to feel like this sort of intoxicated, like fervor, you know, and chaos. And then when you get outside, it becomes very almost like Tennessee Williams-esque of the way it feels, like this. Now you can almost hear the crickets in the backyard, and just like and how beautifully shot those are with shadow and minimal light, and I mean it's like two different worlds when you step outside the house.
And how even when you he got flack for taking the play out into the world, right? It's like that spoils the claustrophobia of being in that house, but yet you get into the outside and it's like the night makes it claustrophobic.
This is the thing about when people are attached to a novel or any type of work and the film is made of it and they say it's not the book. Yeah, you're right. It's not the book.
It's a film.
They are literally two different mediums, and the job of the filmmaker is to find the best way to adapt that to the screen. And you have to make those types of decisions. Because it's not, you don't have the luxury of a stage in which you can literally make someone believe anything at any time. And well, you're trying to achieve the same thing, but through different means. In film. Two different.
And he would be like you feel when you watch this film, there's a confidence that is unbecoming of a first-time director.
Absolutely.
And he says that it was just because the text was so strong that he just knew what to do with it. But there's also, you feel his...
That's him being humble, though, because I mean, there's tons of people who might have messed this up.
But you can feel during like parts of this film that he is, he is a young first-time director being like, oh, what happens when I take the camera and I do this? Like the spots where he goes handheld, or even when they do when they have the first blow up, and we're tight on Elizabeth Taylor as she's screaming and telling stories about Richard Burton. He's dancing around and he's singing, and then they cut to like the point of view shots of him moving back and forth of Nick and Honey.
I mean, when I went to acting school, there was they had a whole exercise that was levels. And, they'd tell you before you go in, okay, you're the boss, you're the employee. You're the boss, right now you're at an 8, an employee, you're at a 2. Go. Wow. And then you feel what that feels like to be at a 2. Okay, now we're going to go for, and then they adjust it until you're the 8 as the employee, and you're basically just saying what, it's like completely changes the dynamic. And I feel like this is almost a master class in how to have levels between between characters, and it moves from conversation to conversation, and someone has the upper hand each time, and it changes. It's just like a cerebral chess match. This like where each one's trying to outdo the other, and it's like you want to just say stop playing games, and that way everything will be on a much more communicatable level. But. And then we wouldn't have the play.
We wouldn't have these amazing scenes. And each character, like you have something to do when you're each character.
It's so rich, and there's a reason all 4 major. First of all, it was nominated for only second movie in history to be nominated for every eligible category.
Right.
But all 4 actors nominated. I mean,
it speaks volumes to
yes,
to them.
the characters just jump off the page.
And you know, he has a story that he had talked to Robert Redford about playing Nick, and that he said, I can't play Nick because he's too weak throughout the whole play, and he's the character that's put upon the whole play, and that's true. You know, you don't come. It's the type of part where you have to kind of forego your vanity. But
to me, that there's so much interesting stuff there because of the fact that he like kind of postures as this in the beginning,
right? And
then, but I love the scene with Elizabeth Taylor when she just like reduces him down when she's like, you know what, you're not, you don't know anything. You think you know. I mean.
Right. That's when she says,
"Yeah,
there's only been one love of my life,
right.
and that's George."
Right.
And he's
like,
like,
how could him? Yeah.
That is what another thing that is, and this is just because I love this film and I have to. I feel like Robin and I have to watch it at least once a year, and being, you know. We recognize the comedy of it so much more now. And he has something in the commentary, he says that when he decided to do the play and turn it into a movie, and he's like, I know how to do it, I have confidence in this text. He's like, my point of view is that this is about 2 characters who love each other very much. And he said that always got like stares and like bafflement, like, what do you mean? It's about 2 people who love each other, they're at each other all the time. And that the imaginary child is such a perfect metaphor for that secret bond that you have with the one that you love, and that how much it angers you when someone betrays that.
Right. And by killing the child, it's almost killing their love.
Right.
But he felt betrayed.
Yeah.
You know. So, you know, it's hard to figure out who's at fault at any given time, or how, because what you're seeing, and what an interesting play would be watching these 2 fall in love the first time, or like how it first happened.
Right.
Because you're sort of seeing it at this, you know, Elizabeth Taylor. Put on 30 pounds. Like, people didn't really think she'd be able to pull this off, and she clearly
she's amazing.
Did.
I mean, when you think about her as an actress, and you know, one of the most beautiful actresses of all time. Yeah. And like all beautiful people, they tend to get undervalued as for the skill that they have.
Because they could just be a movie star if they wanted to be, but a lot of them, the great ones, it's like they don't rest on their, you know, laurels and really work at.
And they say that like like Richard Burton, George Segal, and Sandy Dennis, they were in awe of her and how much she
seems method,
but also like that she's such a film actress that they were in awe of her as coming from the stage. They were like, wow, she knows exactly where the camera is and what this little movement does, how it's going to communicate with the camera. And Nichols even said that like it's one of her and Dustin Hoffman are the only 2 actors that he's worked with where when he's watching it live, he's like, okay, that was okay. And then he sees it in the editing room and he's like, oh my God, like I can't believe it's transformed into a...
Right. I love the introduction to her character in the very opening. It's like she eats a chicken wing or something, and then she like throws the bone into the fridge.
Yep.
And then when she's cleaning upstairs, she takes a dirty dish and like puts it in the nightstand cabinet. I mean, it just really just is such a great, clear introduction to how much drunkenness has just transformed this reality into what it is.
And she speaks through the chicken. as she's chewing the chicken, she's
Yes.
talking.
I mean, it made me think of Chinatown and the scene where they're actually eating, and it's like it really, it really does add realism. Well, if you read the stories about how this was really groundbreaking for what the dialogue was like. I mean, I guess the MPAA was like, we're not gonna, if you don't make changes, we're not gonna approve this movie.
And it's so funny because, so in the play, they wanted to say F you. Mm-hmm. They were forced to change it to screw you.
Right.
In the film, they wanted her to say screw you. They had to loop it so that she says God damn you.
Right.
So it's so funny, like it was groundbreaking, but there was still like the MPA saying like, not too much.
They basically made concessions,
but it's
they still like, got across what they. It's such a tightly knit kind of thing because the only other two characters, like the roadhouse owner and the wife, and I was reading that it's actually the film's gaffer and his wife. Right.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's just such a cool, enclosed, contained world. It's tough because it's like almost it's like an awkward movie to watch. It's like really like, I don't know, there's times when you just feel like you have to sometimes be in the right mood because it's a lot. It's so like these people's lives are. It's interesting. There's that scene where Burton, he knows that they're upstairs, and there's a chain on the door, and he's like so infuriated, and you feel his wrath. You just feel it, the righteous, self-righteous wrath.
Yep.
And he kicks and he kicks the door down or whatever, gets in there, and for a split second you think, oh wait, maybe this is going to turn from passive aggressiveness to full-on aggression.
Yeah.
Like maybe he'll go upstairs and, if you haven't seen it, and maybe he'll go upstairs and like kill him. It's like, who knows where this is going to go. Because the comedy's very dark. Right. And it's like, it's very real and truthful. And when he pauses on the stairs and just like laughs and then goes outside and cries, it shows that point of human despair where like laughter and tears are inseparable from each other.
Yeah. And
it's just, I mean, he's at his wit's end. He's just had enough.
And that the film walks this, like it's like a dangerous tightrope where tonally the comedy can be that super dark, but it can also be broad too in moments.
Yeah.
But that the drama of it and the tragedy of it, it never feels like, there's never like a moment where you feel like, I don't buy this, or I don't, obviously it's an overblown production of an emotion, right? Most people, if they did that, would wait until the guests leave to say, like, I really wish you hadn't have done that, and then they'd have it out. But to find out, to plan out this like elaborate exorcism, as he calls it, and this revenge about, I'm going to show you. You think you have something on me. I'm going to show you that I have something on you.
Right.
And that you thought that I'm the weak one in the relationship, and that I'm dependent on you. And it turns out that you're equally, if not more, dependent on me. And that rivalry between, people who do love each other but feel like they are taking the other for granted.
Well, and it's I started to read a really great article by Dominic Cavendish in the Telegraph about Edward Albee and about how he was an instinctive puncturer of the American dream, and I just thought that was such an astute kind of way of describing it, because it's like clearly their relationship is so fractured, but there is love, but there's been priorities placed on the wrong things. It's like the way she makes him feel and tries to make him feel so small, but then he lashes out, and then but then through the younger couple being there, all of their problems are just rise to the surface. Right. So it's like this examination of two different generations.
Right. And there's so many revelations throughout the whole thing, and at the end that Nick and Honey are shown to be like they're the lie, they're the relationship that they don't know each other at all, they don't love each other at all. It's all kind of like a construct. But also, like, you watch the movie, and after repeat viewings, like, you see just how the power dynamics are so strong and so tightly plotted that you cannot, like, you can say, like, oh, she mentions the imaginary kid to Honey, so that's what sets him off. But then, I mean, in the beginning, he refuses to kiss her, and she takes that as, you know, why can't you kiss me? So that you can look at it and say, like, oh, it started here. Oh, it started, like, you know.
I mean, a lot of this is due to the writing, but a lot of it is also due to the inherent chemistry between Taylor and Burton, is that you feel like they have done this dance 1,000 times. They have played this game until the game is just, that is very successfully achieved, that feel of the wheels are going to fall off, because it's just, they've just spun it around too many times. So, you know, you don't even know why you're playing anymore. I mean,
cinematography, Haskell Wexler again.
It's not showy at all. It's very economic. It's very just tightly, and I feel like that the cinematography and editing worked so well together, just creating this realistic experience.
Right. Sam Osteen, who also did.
We talked about for West Side Story.
Yep.
But also did tons of great films.
So apparently he and Haskell Wexler and Mike Nichols didn't get along. And I always thought that there was more to the story than there is, I guess. So in all of my digging, the only thing that I could find out is that he would take so long to light that it drove Mike Nichols crazy. But then he would look at the footage and it's like, well, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it looks great.
Right.
But I can also, on the flip side of that, I can attest to, like, having to wait like so long just to get this one thing that you need to get, especially when you think it's fleeting.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the black and white. One of my favorite stories, the backstory of this, is that he wanted to do it in black and white because Elizabeth Taylor's makeup wouldn't keep in color. Kind of similarly to, like, in Some Like It Hot, like, he had to shoot it in black and white or else they would look ridiculous. And I guess there was arguments between him and Jack Warner as to whether or not it should be in color or black and white. And he was like, well, if it's going to be in color, then you're going to have to find another director because I won't direct it if it's not in black and white. So then he goes out and he hires another cinematographer, and they're talking about movies that Mike Nichols likes, and he showed him 8.5 by Fellini, and he's like, I love the way this black and white looks, like, we should try to get it to look like this. And that director of photography comes back to him and says, I know how to get that look, and the thing is we have to shoot it in color and then...
Like what the Coen brothers did with Man Who Wasn't There, you like reverse and colorize it.
And Mike Nichols said, I'm sorry you said that because...
Or no, it was opposite for them. Or no, you shoot it in color. No, right, shoot it in color, turn it into black and white. Yeah.
And Mike Nichols said, I'm sorry you said that because now I have to fire you. Because he knew that it was Jack Warner saying,
right,
you know, shoot it in color, and that way he will have no choice.
Yeah.
So he gets Haskell Wexler, and just the two of them just It feels like they just clicked, like they knew. But the story that he tells is that, like the first scene with them coming into the house, he was trying to plot out, like, you know, how do we move the camera? And Haskell Wexler was like, well, we can follow them down the hallway, and then we can, you know, lead them into the kitchen, and he's doing all this like movement, and he's like, well, what would be the story point? Like, why would we do this? And Haskell Wexler's like, well, I just think it's an interesting shot.
Right.
And Mike Nichols is like, okay, I have to be the one to say the camera has to move this way, and it's because of this thematic story point.
Right. I love that the action of the camera has to be justified. Right. Which should be the case.
But I guess like that was, you know, Haskell Wexler's kind of, you know, again, like we talked about in the heat of the night, like he's experimental and he will do all
this
these
is the thing.
things.
Not every people knock Inarritu because they think he's trying to be excessively showy with The Revenant and Birdcage, right? But it's like, you know, every film requires something different.
Right.
And this one needed to feel the way it did.
Yeah.
In order to support the dramatic tension.
And there's so many like the him, and this kind of speaks to like the difference between doing a play and doing a film. But you know, him going to the closet, getting the rifle.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that scene is amazing. Because if you've never seen the film or haven't heard about it, then, I mean, who knows what's about to happen?
Right.
You know? Seems like it's building towards something like that.
Right. And again, like that tonally, that you can get an audience to feel such dread that something terrible is about to happen.
Yes.
And you're seeing that terrible thing come up into the frame, and you think you know what's going to happen, and then poof, and it's an umbrella, and then
you know,
that's comedy.
Another big part of this is a pervasive theme throughout plays, but in literature and art, is just the complete imprisonment of alcoholism and just emotional carnage. I mean, it's just, it's on full display here.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a line that there are half-filled glasses all over the house. I mean, that's the problem. When you're never not drunk, and I know that's a double negative, but it's like, then there's no, when you make that your reality, you no longer are in reality. That's the problem. But you need it to feel like that's the only way you'll survive. Burton has a great line that he's trying to give him a survival kit. He's like, I'm trying to give you a survival kit. And it's there's a lot of sad lines when he says to Burton, you know, you're going to regret this. He goes, I regret everything. I mean, there's just so many sad lines, but that one was so sad, the survival kit one, because it was like, oh man, it's like the game's lost already. You're basically just letting them know, like, here's how you can try to preserve some modicum of insanity. Yeah. Or some modicum of sanity throughout this whole, like, charade.
Right. And there's so many good, like, first of all, we always marvel at the fact that it begins at 2 a.m.
I mean, Burton has the line, she goes, they'll be here soon. He goes, what'd they do, go home and get some sleep first? I mean, right? To be able to start
They've just come from a party. Right. Until 2 a.m. They get home, and then they go, and they're still, and the amount of alcohol that is consumed, it's like,
I mean, they probably, it'd be kind of fun to go back and observe how much was actually drank, like how many bottles did they go through? Right. Did they go through a full bottle?
Right. Yeah.
Probably did. Or two. Right.
And then, you know, as an actor, like you got, you know, one of the hardest things to do
is play drunk.
Because
you don't want to play drunk, and that's where people go wrong. Is you discover By not playing it drunk, it allows you to make discoveries
Yes.
of real things you do when you're drunk. And the problem is if you're going, you're already playing at something and not allowing your real connection to that state.
And it's so, one, it's the hardest thing in the world to play drunk, and the conventional wisdom is to not do it.
Right.
But you have 4 characters who are playing drunk.
Right.
And different levels of it.
Right.
And I always, it's fun to kind of look back. Like, there's just little moments that happen where you see them and you're like, oh my, I get it. Like, he's got to be really drunk, because
Right.
that's a moment that could only happen. But there's the moment when, right before his amazing monologue, but he's talking, Nick is on the swing, and they're talking, and he asks him, just kind of matter-of-factly, is like, do you have any other kids? and he has a moment where he's just like, what? And he just can't, but like, he even forgets that they had that.
You're so in that, and that is a great moment of just being at.
And then when he recognizes it, and he's just got this little cackle, and he's like, what? Like, oh no, just the one. But like, and it's just it's those types of moments where you know that they all kind of recognize that they have this great text that they want to honor, and that they that they know will take care of them, but that they've all just either collectively or on their own done their homework.
See, this is the thing, and I dealt with a similar challenge when I did Moon for the Misbegotten, because O'Neill was the same way.
Yeah.
And especially with playing a character that's drunk pretty much throughout the whole work, is the dialogue is like it's like a puzzle that you have to figure out, and it's a map. And each line, especially when it's really specific, it's like you have to decode why. You can't, that's the thing, is like you can't just, there has to be, you have to discover the reason that's being said based on that particular person. Because being drunk, it's like unlocks these like most truthful parts of ourselves, and it just comes out. So it's like that's the challenge. You have to understand that character so well, and the psyche of that character when you're dealing with a writer of this magnitude, because everything is there for a reason.
Right. Have you ever done this?
No.
Or a scene from it?
I'd love to.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's the thing, is every character is so masterfully scripted.
Yes.
That there is not a weak character. Everything. It reminds me of Network in that regard, where like
every character has their moment to shine.
Yes.
Yeah. And in their own way.
Same with Streetcar. It's like all 4 of those characters are brilliant. Same thing here.
It feels like it would be the type of play that even suggesting doing it, it's like, just don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
It would feel to me like it would be that type of play where like, it's like you want to do it so much.
I mean, the fact that Taylor did this and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and just shows her caliber.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Richard Burton, are you a spy that came in from the cold fan?
I never saw it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like he had this Night of the Iguana. And
well, he's great in Look Back in Anger too, man. I mean, Night of the Iguana and this are 2 movies that I grew up when I was like 18. They would be on Turner Classic Movies, and I would catch like a chunk of it. Right. And I had never sat down, and I think this one, I still haven't watched Night of the Iguana in its entirety, but this one, I finally, I think when I was at World of Video, I finally took it out and watched it, the whole thing. It's still one of those that, I don't know, that I respect the hell out of it. I don't know if I love it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, speak to me in the way that some other films do. And I just had to be honest about that, where I'm watching it and I'm just like, I don't know if this, forces me to watch it. I'm very respectful of everything on display here, but it's just not, it doesn't captivate me, Yeah.
I will say that it continues to grow for me. And I, you know, part of it is just because of like the worship that I had in college of Mike Nichols.
Right.
And, you know, trying to attach yourself to like, okay, what is my, you know, how do I feel about directing? What type of director do I want to be? How do I want to work with actors? And he was just, you know, he would be one of those directors that I would read an interview or see an interview or listen to commentaries, and it's kind of like, I think I've said this before, where it's like, it's like with Kubrick or Hitchcock, like everything they say is like this little nugget of wisdom that you just want to take, and you're like, okay, I got that, and I want to use that, and you know, he's got tons of it where it's just like, you know, every great film is about something, but also about something else.
You know, the way you were talking about Nichols, it almost sounded like Kubrick, because Kubrick was always trying to learn what he hadn't learned yet.
Right.
And as smart as he was and brilliant as he always was respectful of knowledge that he hadn't acquired yet. And he just cared so much about learning more.
And that he wanted to push, you know, he does this, and then his second film is The Graduate, you know, and you can see.
You know, this makes me want to rewatch Closer, because I remember just really not liking Closer, and I'd like to go back and watch some of his later work to see, because there's a bunch I actually haven't seen. Was it Silk Road? Silkwood. Yep. Postcards from the Edge. There's a bunch that I haven't watched.
It's weird. He's one of these directors where you're like. You know, Robin and I were having this conversation where I'm like, you know, I told her, I was like, you know, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? It's Mike Nichols' first movie, and that's not fair. And she's like, well, what's his second movie? And I'm like, The Graduate. And she's like, oh.
Yeah.
And then
Carnal Knowledge is a great film.
Carnal Knowledge is great. Catch
22, man. Third film.
Third film. So the first four films.
Heartburn's pretty good. I like that one.
But he has like this. He has like this career where it's like everyone who talks about him now is like, oh, the once great Mike Nichols, or you know, Mike Nichols, the person who started.
Well,
so
he did
great,
Wolf, and like, you know, he kind of, and you know, you could probably go back, and Wolf would probably be a lot of fun, you know. But it's just like it. I think that didn't do well, right, critically. Right. I feel like that kind of.
Well, and he had like those like I want to go back and actually rewatch Silkwood, because it was something that I didn't really think about too much when I did see it, but that could just be my age.
Yeah.
But then, you know, Working Girl is not my cup of tea either, but it's still one of those
that was a big hit.
I'm a sucker for Biloxi Blues.
Yeah, love Biloxi Blues.
I mean, I watched that all the time when I was a kid.
So, Walken talks about working on At Close Range, and about how Sean Penn played the trick on him. I think he talked about it during his Actor Studio interview, and how he took it's like, I'm going to go get the real gun, right? And he was like deathly afraid of guns, and he used that on Matthew Broderick in Biloxi Blues, learning it from Sean Penn. Yeah, just that is he crazy? Like, is this real?
Right. And man, and you know, of all the jokes and the kind of the way Christopher Walken is kind of like Jeff Goldblum, where it's like he just is a character. Right. I think that also overshadows the fact like his performance in Biloxi Blues is I mean, I love it just because he's so damn funny, and he's so not the dark, sinister Christopher Walken, and he had every right to be in the role, but he plays it so kind of comic and kind of warm and cuddly at the same time that he's also, you know, is this guy going to flip at one point and become, and that's what that whole final scene with him and the gun is all about, is like you just don't know exactly what this guy is going to do. Yeah, I mean, and even like I think The Birdcage rises in. It's great in history as becoming a great film. I think when it first came out, it was kind of like,
yeah. I feel like he was still killing it at that point. I mean, that was a big hit.
Yeah, I saw it closer in the theaters, and I remember walking out and being like, I just remember thinking like, okay, I don't ever have to watch that movie ever again.
I just thought it was like, I wasn't a huge fan of Natalie Portman's performance. I could just I could tell she was acting. It just didn't feel real to me, and like, it just felt like, oh, woe is me. Like, it's just this, and maybe he was trying to make a point about that generation, the generation. You know, I don't know.
I think I can't remember who it was. There was I think it might have been Janet Maslin, but it's like I don't know why he decided to make this movie when he already made it with Carnal Knowledge.
Right. Well, it's basically like he was trying to remake Carnal Knowledge, just like Hart. I feel like, you know. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, sometimes you want to see if you can do that with the modern kind of way of looking at things.
But even while he's like, even as his film career gets a little questionable in terms of the quality of films that he's doing, you know, he's still directing plays. You know,
yeah,
Angels in America,
didn't he do? Yeah, he did The Seagull at Central Park when I was living down there, and I remember I wanted to see it so bad. It was Christopher Walken, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, Kevin Kline, maybe Meryl Streep. It was an unbelievable cast.
Yep. I mean, just before he died, he did Death of a Salesman with Hoffman, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, I didn't even know that until I dug up an interview and he was talking about it, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe like that. You know, how is there not footage that I can watch just to see that?
Yeah.
But he's just, you know, so him and Soderbergh do commentary on The Graduate, on this, and on Catch-22.
Wow.
And all three of them are just like back-to-back, like master classes.
I gotta get the Blu-ray of Catch-22 because I've only seen it.
I'm holding off. I keep thinking that Criterion's going to do that and Carnal Knowledge, and this, for God's sake.
So Catch-22 is 70, right?
70.
So you think next year they'll be doing the 50-year? Yeah.
But even like that film, like, you know, it's one of those films where it's like, you know, he got a little cocky, and it's
with which one?
With Catch-22, because it's very ambitious, and it's like,
well, you have to be able to get the tone of the novel, and I feel like he did like 3/4 of the way. Like it got jumbled. Right. It got, like you're talking about, it's like almost like taking on too much and not making sure you have like everything ironed out.
Right.
You're juggling just too much.
And they kind of like so it was he and Buck Henry doing it again from The Graduate, and their modus operandi was, you know, in The Graduate you have these montages where one scene lead like goes into another, and dialogue can like, it connects two different scenes. And he's like, let's do the whole movie that way. And it can, as you're watching it, if you're not in tune with that, or you're not following it, it can get muddled.
It's one of those literary adaptations where it's sort of like suffered from what Inherent Vice suffered from, which is, if you're not a fan of Heller and you haven't read that book, just like with Pynchon, you're going to be like, what? And with Inherent Vice more, because I think people were like, what am I watching? Where if you've read the book, you're like, this is cool. Yeah. You know, so.
And I think like Fear and Loathing I would put into that too. In that, like,
I feel like less so only because it's like so like visually, like, you know, people. I feel like if you haven't read the book, you can still be. You're like you're in it you're in the ride. Right. The other ones seem more like intellectual, like more intellectual. Yeah. Where people are like, if you don't know that world.
I just know that you know, there's been several occasions where I've started watching especially in college, started watching Fear and Loathing with someone. And after 20 minutes, they're like, "Is the whole movie like this? Because I can't do this."
That's a good point. Yeah.
And it's the same thing with like Inherent Vice and with
I think it speaks volumes for what Fincher did with Fight Club.
Yeah.
I mean, you do not have to read that book to fully appreciate that story. He really did a great job of making it seem like his own world.
Right. Absolutely. Oh my God, I'm trying to think if there's something else. Nope, got nothing.
Yeah. I have a couple of lines that I wrote down. She says, "Why do you never put ice in my drinks?" He says, "I always put ice in your drinks. You eat it. That's all." I mean, just establishing their relationship. It's funny. It's real.
Right.
It's funny because it's real. I love that unforced humor that is just funny because this is what these people do. Like,
I also love like when you realize how comfortable two people are with each other. Like when at the beginning when they're on the bed
I love
and
that.
they laugh and she coughs.
Yes.
Or I think he coughs. But it's like that type of cough where it's like, you know, I'm not ashamed to show that I'm coughing in front of my lover. It's not.
Well, yeah, and there's a silence after their laughter that's really great too, because when you've got great dialogue, it's those pregnant silences that really become fascinating, because there's so much that you can kind of recollect in a scene beat like that fuels that next, that next dance you do. In that same article that Cavendish wrote, there's this great part about how Albee was influenced by, his writing style was influenced by, I mean, of course, like the greats like Chekhov and stuff, but like by listening to it's like, you want to understand how to write drama? He's like, go listen to Bach's concerto. Like, he said he got his understanding of drama from listening to classical music. He's like, all you have to do is just listen to where it goes. It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
So a couple more. Taylor says to Burton, "I swear if you existed, I'd divorce you." I mean, just lines like that just like casually cut you. There's probably an irony there somewhere, but I'm not drunk enough to figure out what it is. And then instead of water under the bridge, blood under the bridge. I mean, it's just great writing. She says, "That's the most life you've shown in a long time." He says, "You bring out the best in me, baby." Like, just little, that's the thing, is for every great line, there's a great reaction line. And that's just I would imagine that Tarantino studied these types of films too, just to have an understanding of that kind of flow of dialogue.
Yeah. So, Aaron Sorkin, says that like this was the first play that he really listened to, and like the way the people talked and like the sing-song quality of the dialogue. Sure, where we keep the euphemism. I love that.
I love when she says to George Siegel, "You're no better than anybody else." He goes, "I think I am," and he says it to himself. He's not saying it to her. He's like thinking about what she said, and he really he's really he's at that age where that naivete is just like in full swing, and he's just like he's idealistic, and he's high. He's like really, It's just I think the generational gap there is really what allows for all of that to take place,
right?
Because it'd be different if it was just like two couples that were the same age.
Right. And the fact that he's there because she is the daughter of the dean and all that.
I mean, he even
stuff.
says it to her. He even says, "I should start here." And then he goes, "I almost think you want me to."
And then,
or I almost think you're serious. And then he goes, "No, you're the one who's afraid you're serious, and it scares the hell out of you."
I love the bit that she thinks he's in the math department when he's really in the biology department.
Oh,
and even when she finds that out, and it's like...
And that bit never gets old, and they're able to actually make puns out of it with history. And because what is he calls it historic inevitability, and that gets used later. I mean, there's all these little seeds that get planted that, these setups that always get payoffs. It says he doesn't... That's the thing. It's such a well architected script. He's so in control. And then last one, truth and illusion. You don't know the difference? says we must carry on as though we did. I mean, that just harkens back to, I mean, the type of plays that O'Neill wrote too. I mean, Iceman Cometh, it's about pipe dreams. Mm-hmm. As long as you got your pipe dream, you'll be all right. Because you never have to know the truth. You can just keep hiding from the truth. And it's when someone, it's almost like Burton, it's almost like Taylor, by mentioning the kid, killed the pipe dream. Like basically, like put the spotlight on, like what Hickey does in Iceman Cometh, of like upsets the whole vibe. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, well, all right, now I'm gonna bring the whole house down. You know?
And the way that the way that Nichols translates that into cinema. So like when Honey comes down and then mentions the birthday. Mm-hmm. And then we get that shot where it's just a close-up on Burton and he spins around really quick. And it just lands on, like, that's the great part about it too, is that he knows how and when to use a close-up and doesn't waste it. But also, like, the whole scene when he tells her that the child's dead.
Yeah.
That at that point that you're so wrapped up in the story and into it that he reveals that and she reacts to it so terribly.
Yeah. Well, and he finds out her secret too.
Yeah. Well,
right.
But that like it's ridiculous, but it doesn't come off as ridiculous. Mm. You know, knowing that it's an imaginary child that she screams as if it's a real child.
Right.
And then, you know, the whole thing where like she's talking and then he's doing the Latin. I mean, there's so many, like it's
that like part is
it's got like this gothic horror element to it.
Yeah.
Even though it's completely played straight. I mean, the black and white helps with that too, but you know, it is like Kazan, where there's so many different cinematic elements that is at play here.
I forget which of the crew worked with Polanski a bunch too. I forget which one it was.
Well, Sam Osteen was...
Worked with Rosemary's Baby, yep. Chinatown, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, it's almost like similar type of like, it's that scene with the Latin behind the dialogue, it like made me think of a Polanski moment because it's so controlled right. And the atmosphere is so orchestrated.
Well, it's sort of like the end of Rosemary's Baby, where it's like it's almost comical how crazy this whole thing just became.
Right.
And again, and you know, and he talks about in the commentary about the conversations that he would have with Sam Osteen, the way they worked together as an editor, and like he would have him on the set, and he would just ask him, it's like I have this idea about this piece of dialogue spinning into that, and he's like, can we do that? And Nichols saying that he's the only editor that's never like has always said like, of course we can do that.
Wow.
You know, of course we can find out a way to do that. They would take like. Apparently, Richard Burton, when he was doing Latin, didn't speak it correctly, so they would take syllables from other pieces of dialogue that he said, and like put it in there so that we could correct it. Huh. And then I forget what was. At a certain point, Jack Warner, I guess, did this with every director, but at a certain point in the mix, or during the editing process, he would ban the director from the editing room. But Sam Osteen would call him every night and play the mix for him over the phone. And he would just be like, all right, that sounds good.
You know, as far as the music, it's pretty barren of score, right? It has one scene where there's music playing during in the Roadhouse. Right, but I'm trying to remember when else there's music.
The source music there, and then Alex North is the composer,
who's pretty decorated himself as far as his.
But it is a
resume.
very Yeah, it's very sparse.
Yes.
It's very like, just, one instrument kind of played.
Right, and I feel like that is very effective because by not employing certain tricks of the trade of how to manipulate an audience using music, by completely avoiding that, usually people avoid that by being super minimalist, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, they don't want to, but with this it was just like, no, just let the actors talk. And then almost sound becomes your music, right? Just the way sound is used becomes your, because they released this on vinyl as pretty much all the dialogue with everything. Like that's the soundtrack, which speaks volumes about how they looked at this sound-wise,
right.
And
it's weird because you would think, oh, it's just dialogue. It's not that intricate.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at each scene and what things are happening, or like, the fact that when he does go to the closet, the conventional wisdom would be, well, he's away. He's walking down the hall and he's in the other room and he's away from them. Mm-hmm. So her dialogue should be toned down,
right.
as if he's hearing it in another room. But they don't do that. They do it as because he's heard it so many times that he knows exactly what she's saying at each moment.
Very interesting.
And
I think I would experience this film completely differently if I saw it in the theater, because it's like, this morning I'm finishing it. There's like a glare coming through the window. I feel like it's one of those things where unless you have a perfect lighting situation to be able to appreciate how it looks,
right.
You're really not appreciating all the different parts of this film.
And it's also like, you mentioned that American Beauty owes
absolutely.
a lot to it.
Especially the dynamic between the husband and wife.
And I think similar to that film is that, I remember being, saw it in the theater, loved it, then got it on DVD, watched it again, and it's like I was experiencing a different movie.
Talking about American Beauty?
Yeah.
Yeah, it still holds up to me to this day. Like,
it does, but there's something very underwhelming about the, everyone
can see the strings more, and they seemed invisible when you watched it theatrically, and that
because everyone would be like American Beauty, it's not all that, the bag thing, it's stupid. And I'm like, when I watch it now, I'm like, it's very heavy-handed. But goddamn if I wasn't crying in the theater when I saw it.
And the performances are so good, and when it matters, the dialogue is so good, and the execution of it is so good, that's what made it feel like a 70s Bob Rafelson Nicholson film. Mm-hmm. That had that sort of like, you just are there. Yeah. You're rooting for Lester. You're just like, it just becomes that, just like you were in 5 Easy Pieces. It really speaks to that era.
And I think this is like the same thing. It's like, part of it is it's kind of like the right place, right time. Somewhat got to be in the right mood to watch it. Yeah. But once you're cued into it and you're like, oh, I see it now for like the masterwork that it is.
Yeah.
Now it's just like each time I'm watching it.
Well, you can focus on different things and like, did you read who Jack Warner originally wanted for George and Martha?
Well, it was. I can't remember if I. Go ahead.
James Mason and Betty Davis.
Yes.
And Nichols got a kick out of the idea of Betty Davis saying the line from her own movie.
Yeah.
And or maybe it was Albee. Maybe it was Albee that got a kick out of that. He's like.
Yes. Yeah, because
Warner was pitching it to Albee, basically. Right. Yeah.
And I think Albee had like. He at one time wanted Katharine Hepburn. Okay. And I forget who the other one. It may have been James Mason or it may have been Cary Grant. I'm not sure. But yeah. But then, the way Elizabeth Taylor says "what a dump" and the trivia behind it that, you know, in the original movie that Bette Davis did, it's not that pronounced, it's not that over the top.
Right.
But that when she would have to do readings of it, or they did like a play version and she would play it, she would have to do it the way that Elizabeth Taylor did it, because...
Yeah. I love that scene because they are going at each other's throats the same way they are about anything. Where like, he's trying to just like let her, like he talks about how he just lets it all wash over him now. Or he's able to not hear her and hear her at the same time because he's heard it so much. She is going at him about, what is she trying to figure out the name of the movie? Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And she is just, her stakes are so high in that scene, and it's just amazing to watch because, and that the thing is, that is the sort of masterful job of being drunk, of like of playing that, of like finding that, because when you are that drunk, it's like, yeah, you're gonna put a lot of weight, you're gonna, you know, to this one thing that could be minuscule, but it's like, no, you want to know, damn, and why are you? The thing is, it's subtext, right? It's the whole thing is subtext. Right. So it's like you could spend a whole hour trying to figure out the subtext behind what is this really? What are they really arguing about? What is this? You know?
And it's funny because every she's so great at playing those little moments where she's kind of digging at him, but I swear, like every time, like even just hearing you say those things, I'm like. And you're mentioning the subtext, it's like, well, in all those things, it's like the subtext is I love you. Right. Like there's,
because if you didn't care, and that's the thing, it's like that, it's like sometimes it gets lost, is like, if someone doesn't care, they honestly don't exert the effort. Right. Right? Right. If you don't care, it's like, I'm just leaving, or I don't want to be, the fact that they are continuously around each other for this long, clearly they love each other. Yep. But there's a lot of fractured parts of it that they are not actively addressing, and that's what creates this sort of circus. Yeah.
Well, and for him, it's like underneath my love for you is animosity.
And there's a shared tragedy, man. They have never gotten over the fact that they couldn't have kids together. That broke them a long time ago. And alcohol has been their way of dealing with that. And it's just erupting all over this unsuspecting couple. Like when they first arrive, their introduction to the dinner party, or to the after hours party, is "God damn you" being yelled towards the door. Maybe we should leave. Right. I mean, it's great. Their character arc from the beginning. Well, I always love when, so I just watched Ghost for the first time recently, and I love it because Patrick Swayze obviously has his character arc, right? But then like Whoopi Goldberg has her own, because she starts off as kind of this sham, but she has psychic ability. But she, like, by helping him, helps herself, and like all that. You know, I just love the idea of the protagonist having their own character arc, but then like having these side characters have their own journeys and their own lessons and their own, you know.
And that's when you know you're in the hands of someone who is a good writer, is that they're not just like...
No disposable characters.
Right. Like, it's like, oh, no, my main character arcs, and that's good enough.
And that's how you know the film, it's not just about plot. It's like, plot is an instrument. You need to have it be a full functioning anatomy. Right? Plot is like clothing, right? But if you don't have this skeleton where each part connects to the other, it's not really gonna work. There's nothing like a film that like the 12th most important character is played by a good actor. You know, or like, there's all these moments where you're like, oh, that person only had like 2 scenes, but they killed it. Or like, I mean, it's really hard to do a film with this few characters and have it be compelling. It's always a testament to acting and writing and directing.
And it's never not compelling. You know, there's always something going on. There's always some little truth to be uncovered. there's all, you know.
I mean, you could probably teach a class on this play, you know, as well as the film.
It's funny, you know, driving over here, it's like I was thinking, like, why, like, on several different levels, it's like how one writes a play, how one turns a play into a film,
Yeah.
how one
Directs actors.
You know, I mean, it's all kind of in here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's a film that probably not a lot of people would know about, but maybe not a lot of people have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe a film that is, because of the subject matter, because it's so dark, because sometimes you can't see the comedy of it, or it's hard to see the comedy of it, that it's a film that, you know, people don't want to experience. But I mean, you know, if you want to be a filmmaker, or if you love films, I mean, it's just, there's so much there. There's so much there.
I love the era between 1965 and 1970 because, and 71, 72, because there's always like an initial period where it's still like, hasn't established itself as the new decade, right? Like,
Right.
there's something about these films that came out between 65 and 70 that are pushing film towards that, our favorite decade.
Right.
And you see it in Who's That Knocking at My Door, and you know, Cool Hand Luke, and all these films where the classic Redford films from the 60s, late 60s, where you really, and this is one of those where there may be remnants of the early part of the 60s, but there's a new feel to the way it's being made. Mm-hmm. It's starting to go towards that, because look at what Wexler and Nichols and these people would do in that next decade.
Right.
You know, it's all building towards that.
Well, and just talking about Wexler, it's like at the same time that he is shooting this and shooting In the Heat of the Night, he directs Medium Cool.
Right. I mean, he's just. I would really like to read a book about him, because he just seems like such a fascinating student.
He's got a commentary on this that's pretty amazing too. And
he seems like the student who became the master kind of thing. He
Yes.
just absorbed everything around him until he was the one that knew, never stopped learning, and just consistently challenged himself to find the best way to shoot something.
But I agree, like, you know, 66, 67, it's kind of like it's
I mean,
like
Easy Rider.
Easy
right?
Rider.
I mean,
you know, that we can get into, like we said it last week with In the Heat of the Night, it's like, you look at that year and the movies that were nominated.
it's amazing.
And it speaks to In the Heat of the Night that it's not one of those movies that you're like, how in the heck did that win over all this other stuff?
Right.
But then, like, you know, that 69 Midnight Cowboy wins Best Picture.
Well, and this lost to
different.
Man for All Seasons, which was another play adaptation.
Yeah.
You know, so, and another kind of dialogue-heavy actors, you know, performances on display. Interesting. As long as you had a vision.
Yeah, it's I love it. It's, again, you know, one of those movies that Robin, like, it's weird. Like, I think of this film kind of like, I don't know why, but To Kill a Mockingbird is also another film that kind of means something to Robin and I.
Yeah.
And these two films, for whatever reason, there's some kind of connection between them that where it's just like we have to watch them at least once a year, and we get a kick out of it every time. You know.
Isn't Aaron Sorkin directing To Kill a Mockingbird right now on Broadway with Jeff Daniels?
Yeah.
I want to see it. Yeah.
But Robin loves Elizabeth Taylor, his performance in this. You know, swampy. The way she yells swampy at him.
I mean, it's like she plays such an obnoxious character so well.
Yeah. Then, like, when she's smoking the cigarette and talking to Nick, and then he says something behind her, and she's just like, shut up.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if she didn't go to where she goes for those parts, the bombastic kind of way she does it, those quiet moments where she turns away from him and is at the sink, where she turns away from Siegel and is talking about how there's only been one. I mean, those quiet moments really have their, and it's the same with Burton. So she leads with that loudness, right? But then she has her quiet moments. Burton leads with his low-toned witticisms, right? And then when he's in the roadhouse and he's like, "Shut up," or like silent, right. you really feel it. Yeah. You're like, whoa, people are, that's the thing, is that whole walk lightly and carry a big stick type thing. It's like people think they have someone pegged, and then they're just like, shut up and sit down.
Right.
And then you almost really listen to those people, because you're like, oh, you don't normally say that. Yeah. I feel like, so a lot of times people that are posturing all the times are the weakest ones. And they're always, they don't, and it's like, okay, you need to be seen as this, right. Whereas this other person doesn't care about being seen as that. So it's interesting how they represent almost these different sides of the same, different sides of the coin.
Right.
The relationship is, it's beautiful and fascinating and problematic, and the thing is, and what every great play about the American experience, or just any experience, not just American, but it is like you should get to the heart of, it really should be some sort of microcosm of society, mm-hmm. Right? You should be getting to the heart of what are we dealing with, and Albee just does that beautifully. And I think Nichols was very aware of how blessed he was to have this be his first kind of foray
right.
into, because it's like he said, it's like, as long as you don't mess it up,
yeah, you're
good.
Right.
And he had someone he had people like Wexler and Osteen to
learn
from. Be his left and right hand.
Yeah.
That,
It's so this is the problem that Mike Nichols had. He was supposed to do The Graduate first. Didn't think this opportunity kind of came at him, and he kind of asked if he could hold on The Graduate and do this first.
Did he write The Graduate?
No, it was, Buck Henry wrote it, adapted it from the book, but they were kind of talking while he was doing it. But something about The Graduate is like, I'm not as confident in that material as I know that I am about this. So
how much better is The Graduate going to be if you get a film under your belt, right. And you've made a film,
right?
So, what an opportunity! Yeah.
Again, it's just there's so much to this film, mm-hmm. and there's so much to unpack with it.
It's a true onion. It is one of those where you could keep peeling layers.
Right, and it's one of those movies that I think that what it means to me 10 years from now is not what it means to me now, and it will just keep on.
That is how that is how you know something is timeless.
Mm-hmm. But I'm glad we were able to talk about it.
Definitely.
And finally talk about Mike Nichols too.
Mm-hmm.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Read the play. It's an amazing play. If you have a chance to see it live, see that. And then just watch this movie, and then after you watch the movie, listen to the commentary by Mike Nichols and Steven
mm-hmm.
Soderbergh, because I swear it is a master class, and you learn so much from it. All right, so next week, your pick, Killing of a Chinese Bookie, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Cassavetes, yeah, talk about an actor's director.
Right.
Oh boy.
Oh my God.
And a great actor.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, cannot wait.
Awesome. All right. This has been Vermont Film Essentials discussing Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. My name is David Metzger.
My name is Devon E. Wolf.
Take care.